The old veteran rubbed his hands together over the small flame of his camping stove. The chill of October had settled into his bones, making his old war injuries ache more than usual. At 62, he had seen more of life than most. Growing up in the tough neighborhoods of Oakland, serving in the mud and chaos of Vietnam, and now, ironically, fighting another kind of war, survival on the streets of the country he had once risked his life to defend. He hadn't always lived like this. 3 years ago, he had an apartment, a part-time job as a security guard, and his monthly VA benefits. But then the paperwork got mixed up. Someone at the Veterans Affairs office filed his forms incorrectly, and suddenly his benefits were under review. Without that income, he couldn't make rent. Without an address, he couldn't keep his job. And just like that, a man who had once cleared villages in the Mekong Delta was clearing spots in vacant lots to pitch a shelter. But he wasn't one to complain. Life had taught him that complaining changed nothing. Action did. So he built himself a place to live. Nothing fancy, just a lean-to made from discarded plywood, tarp, and whatever else he could salvage from construction sites and dumpsters. He waterproofed it as best he could with layers of plastic and old billboards. Inside he had a foam mattress, a couple of milk crates for storage, and his most prized possession, a small propane camping stove that let him cook hot meals. Tonight's dinner wasn't much. Just a can of beans with some leftover cornbread from the Baptist church food pantry. But it was hot. And on nights like this, hot food was what kept your soul alive when the cold tried to freeze it. The rain had started about an hour ago, gentle at first, then picking up until it drummed on his tarp roof like impatient fingers. He didn't mind the sound. It reminded him of nights in Vietnam during monsoon season, huddled with his unit sharing cigarettes and stories about home. The rain had made them all equal then. All just men trying to stay dry, trying to stay alive. He was stirring his beans, watching the steam rise and disappear into the damp air, when he heard the cursing. Loud creative cursing that cut through the patter of the rain. He peered out from under his tarp overhang and saw a large figure in the distance, standing beside a motorcycle under the highway overpass about 50 yards away. The bike wasn't running, and the man was kicking at it, his frustration visible even from this distance. The veteran watched for a few minutes, recognizing the specific anger of a man, dealing with a machine that wouldn't cooperate. He'd felt it, himself plenty of times in the jungle with trucks that wouldn't start when you needed them most. Without really thinking about it, he called out, "Hey, you need some help?" The figure turned, surprised at the voice coming from what most people would walk by assuming was just another pile of urban debris. The veteran could see him better now. A big man, easily 6'3", with a leather jacket that had seen better days, and a beard that had probably seen worse. The patch on his back was visible even in the dim light, a death's head with wings. Hell's Angels. Most people would have ducked back inside, pretended they hadn't seen anything. The Angels had a reputation, after all. But the veteran had learned long ago that reputations were often just stories people told about each other. He'd served with men who looked like angels and fought like devils, and others who looked rough as hell but would give you their last drop of water. "Bike broke down," the man called back, his voice a gravelly rumble that matched his appearance. "Fuel pump, I think," the veteran nodded. "Got some tools if you need them. And it's warm over here. Got some food, too." There was a pause, the kind that happens when strangers assess each other, measuring risk against need. Finally, the big man gave a short nod. "Appreciate it. Can't do much in this rain anyway." The veteran moved his small propane heater to create more warm space under his tarp extension as the biker approached. Up close, the man was even more imposing. His leather cut covered in patches and pins, his hands big enough to crush walnuts with tattoos covering what skin was visible beneath his sleeves. "Not much, but it's home," the veteran said, gesturing to his shelter. "The heater works better than you'd think." The biker looked at the makeshift structure with what seemed like genuine interest. "You build this yourself?" "Bit by bit. Worked construction in my younger days, before the Army. Still remember a thing or two." The biker nodded, respect flickering across his weathered face. "Military, huh?" "Which branch?" "Army 25th Infantry Division, Vietnam." "No kidding. Marines myself. Never went to Nam, though. Got out in 73, just missed it." And just like that, a bridge formed between them. Not friendship, not yet, but the recognition that comes from shared experience, from understanding what it means to put on a uniform and stand ready. The veteran stirred his pot of beans. Got enough for two if you're hungry. The biker seemed about to decline, but then his stomach growled audibly and both men chuckled. Been riding since morning, the biker admitted. Was heading to meet my club when the bike gave out. The veteran dished up 2 portions of beans in mismatched bowls, one an actual plastic bowl, the other the bottom half of a cut-up milk jug. He handed the proper bowl to his guest along with a plastic spoon. You know anything about bikes? The biker asked between mouthfuls. The veteran shook his head. Cars, yeah. Bikes, not so much. But I've got a flashlight if you want to take a better look once you're warmed up. They ate in companionable silence for a while, just 2 men sharing a meal as the rain continued its steady rhythm on the tarp above. The veteran broke off a piece of cornbread and passed it over. This is good, the biker said, sounding almost surprised. You make this? The veteran laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to lighten the damp air around them. Nah, the ladies at First Baptist make it. They do a food handout every Wednesday. Good people. The biker nodded, finishing his cornbread. You been out here long? And so the veteran told his story, not in a self-pitying way, but matter-of-factly the way you might describe the weather. How he'd worked security after coming home from the war. How the paperwork mix-up had cost him his benefits. How he'd been trying for 3 years to straighten it out, but without an address or phone. Each visit to the VA office was like starting over. Hard to prove who you are when you got nothing, he said, tapping his temple. Got my ID and discharge papers here in a waterproof bag, but half the time the people there don't want to touch them. Like being homeless is catching. The biker listened, really listened in that rare way some people have, as if the words mattered, as if the person speaking them mattered. What about family? The biker finally asked. The veteran shrugged. Sister in Arizona. We don't talk much. Son somewhere in Texas, I think. We lost touch after his mom and I split. When he was done, the biker told his own story, growing up rough in Oakland, the Marines giving him direction, then coming home to find that civilian life felt too quiet, too pointless after the brotherhood of the Corps. The motorcycle club had filled that void, given him purpose and family when he needed it most. The rain began to ease, and the biker glanced toward his motorcycle. Should probably try to get that bike running. Got people expecting me. The veteran grabbed his flashlight, a heavy-duty one he'd found in a dumpster behind an electronics store, and fixed up. They walked together to the overpass, where the big Harley sat gleaming even in the dim light. For the next hour they hunched over the motorcycle, the veteran holding the flashlight steady while the biker checked connections and finally identified the problem. A loose wire to the fuel pump, an easy fix with the small toolkit from the bike's saddlebag. When the engine finally roared to life, the biker looked genuinely pleased. He revved it a few times, the sound echoing under the concrete overpass, then let it idle. Thanks for the help, he said, extending a massive hand. And for the meal, the veteran shook it. Anytime. Safe riding. The biker hesitated, looking back at the lean-to in the distance. Where exactly is this spot? Like if someone was trying to find it? The veteran gave him directions. The service road off the highway, the chain-link fence with the hole cut in it, the path past the old billboard. You got a name? The biker asked. Got lots of them, the veteran replied with a small smile. Army gave me one, streets gave me another. What about you? They call me Road Dog, the biker said with a hint of pride. The veteran nodded. Safe travels, Road Dog. As he watched the motorcycle disappear into the night, the veteran didn't think much about the encounter. Just another moment of connection in a life that had seen many, some lasting, most fleeting. He returned to his shelter, banking his small stove for the night, unaware that this simple act of sharing a meal was about to change everything. Road Dog felt the weight of the evening's encounter as he guided his Harley through Oakland's rain-slicked streets. The rumble of the engine beneath him was familiar and comforting, a constant in a life that had seen its share of chaos. But tonight his mind wasn't on the road or the meeting he was heading to. It was back under that tarp, with a man who had every reason to be bitter but instead had offered warmth, food, and help to a stranger. The clubhouse came into view, a nondescript building with blacked-out windows and the club's insignia painted on the door. Several motorcycles were already parked outside, their chrome catching the glow of the single CQ. Riddy light. Road Dog pulled in beside them, cut his engine and sat for a moment, still thinking. Inside, the clubhouse was alive with the usual Friday night energy. Music pounded from speakers in the corner, Pool balls clacked on the worn table and the smell of beer and cigarettes hung in the air like an old friend. Several club members called out greetings as Road Dogg made his way to the bar, where Big Mike, the chapter president, was deep in conversation with two other senior members. "Thought you might have laid the bike down in this weather," Big Mike said, sliding a beer toward Road Dogg. "Meeting started 20 minutes ago." "Bike trouble," Road Dogg replied, taking a long pull from the bottle. "Fuel pump connection came loose. Would have been stuck out there all night if it weren't for this guy who helped me out." "Membership's cheaper than that fancy bike of yours," someone joked from down the bar, earning a round of laughter. But Road Dogg wasn't laughing. This wasn't just anybody. Vet Vietnam living in a makeshift shelter by the overpass on 98. Guy's been homeless for 3 years because of some paperwork. Screw up with the VA. The mood around him shifted subtly. If there was one thing the club respected, it was military service. Many of them had served themselves. It was one of the bonds that held them together. That understanding of what it meant to put yourself on the line for something bigger than yourself. "He shared his dinner with me," Road Dogg continued, the words coming out gruff but earnest. "Man's got nothing, living in basically a lean-to he built himself, and he offers a stranger half his food without blinking." Big Mike's expression was thoughtful as he sipped his whiskey. "What kind of shape is his place in?" Road Dogg shook his head. "It's clever, guy knows what he's doing. Said he worked construction before the army. But it's still just plywood and tarps. Won't make it through winter." "Winter's coming fast," another member, a burly mechanic called Diesel, noted. "Forecast says we're looking at the coldest one in years." The conversation moved on to club business, the upcoming toy drive, issues with a rival club encroaching on their territory, the new prospect who wanted to patch in. But Road Dogg was quieter than usual, nursing his beer and thinking about the veteran in his makeshift home. Later, as the meeting wound down and members broke into smaller groups, Road Dogg found himself at a table with Big Mike, Diesel, and a few others, including Hammer, who ran a small construction company when he wasn't riding with the club. "So this vet," Big Mike said, bringing the conversation back around. "He just helped you out, no questions asked?" Road Dogg nodded. "Said he had a flashlight and some tools if I needed them. Held the light for me while I fixed the connection. Steady hands too. You can tell he's seen some action." "What's his story?" Hammer asked, leaning forward with interest. "How'd he end up out there?" Road Dogg explained what the veteran had told him about the paperwork error, the loss of benefits, the snowball effect that had left a man who'd served his country sleeping rough while bureaucrats shuffled forms. "That ain't right," Diesel said, shaking his head. "Man serves his country, then gets tossed aside over some pencil pusher's mistake." "You got that right," Hammer agreed. "My old man was in Nam. Said the worst part wasn't the jungle or the fighting. It was coming home to people who either didn't care or looked at you like you were something to be afraid of." Big Mike had been quiet, listening. Now he drained his whiskey and set the glass down with a decisive thunk. "Where exactly is this place of his?" Road Dogg gave them the directions, the service road, the hole in the fence, the path past the old billboard. He described the lean-to in detail, impressed by the ingenuity behind it even as he recognized its inadequacy. "And he built all this himself?" Hammer asked, professional interest evident in his tone. "That's what he said. Mentioned working construction before the army." Hammer nodded slowly, the wheels clearly turning in his mind. "I got some materials left over from that shopping center job. Plywood, 2x4s, some insulation. Just sitting in the yard taking up space," Diesel chimed in. "Got a buddy who owes me for fixing his truck. He works at that home improvement place out by the freeway. Bet he could get us some supplies at cost, maybe even some seconds they can't sell full price." Big Mike looked between them, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. "You boys thinking what I'm thinking?" Road Dogg felt something spark inside him, that sense of purpose, of brotherhood in action that had drawn him to the club in the first place. "I'm in. Whatever it is, I'm in." Big Mike pulled out his phone. "Let me make a few calls. Hammer, you figure out what we need materials-wise. Diesel, talk to your buddy about those supplies. Road Dogg, you remember exactly where this place is? Could find it blindfolded now." "Good. Because we're going back there tomorrow." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Phone calls were made, plans sketched out on bar napkins, inventories of tools and materials compiled. Word spread through the clubhouse and soon other members were volunteering. Sparky, who worked as an electrician, Tank, whose cousin had a small solar panel business, Doc, who wasn't actually a doctor but had been a medic in Iraq and knew more about field medicine than most. By midnight, what had started as a casual conversation had evolved into Operation Veteran, a full-scale mobilization of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter and its extended network. Road Dogg watched in amazement as Big Mike coordinated it all, assigning tasks, making lists, putting the club's considerable resources and connections to work. "How many people you think will actually show?" Road Dogg asked as they finally wrapped up around 2 a.m. Big Mike shrugged. "Hard to say. 20 maybe? But that's enough to make a difference." Road Dogg nodded, feeling a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. He hadn't told the veteran they were coming back. What if the man didn't want their help? What if he saw a bunch of bikers rolling up and thought it was trouble? As if reading his thoughts, Big Mike clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry. We'll approach it right. No pressure. Just an offer to help a brother who deserves better than what he's got." The next morning dawned clear and cold, the rain having washed the world clean. Road Dogg arrived at the clubhouse early, but not early enough. The parking lot was already filling with motorcycles, and a small convoy of pickup trucks and vans was forming on the street outside. He counted at least 30 people milling around, loading tools and materials, checking plans, drinking coffee from a massive urn someone had set up. Big Mike spotted him and waved him over to where he was standing with Hammer and several others, looking at building plans spread across the hood of a truck. "Good, you're here," Big Mike said. "We're just going over the plan. Hammer's designed something that should work with the space available and the materials we've got." Hammer pointed to the sketch. Simple design, but solid. Insulated walls, proper roof, window for ventilation, door that actually locks. Can't do plumbing, obviously, but we can set up a good rainwater collection system. And Tank's cousin came through with those solar panels, enough to power some lights and maybe a small heater. Road Dogg stared at the plans, then at the growing crowd around them. "There's got to be 40 people here," Big Mike grinned. Word got around. Called in some folks from the San Jose and Richmond chapters, plus friends, family, people who owe us favors. Turns out a lot of people want to help when they hear about a vet living rough. As Road Dogg took it all in, a voice called out from the crowd. "Hey, Big Mike. Got room for a few more?" They turned to see 3 women approaching, partners of club members, each carrying boxes of food and thermoses. Behind them came more people. A group of younger riders from a sport bike club, normally not the type to mix with the Angels, but today standing shoulder to shoulder with them. An elderly man in a Vietnam veteran cap carrying a folded American flag. A local news reporter who had apparently gotten wind of the gathering, cameraman in tow. "Told you," Big Mike said quietly to Road Dogg. "People want to help. They just need someone to show them how." At 9 a.m. sharp, the convoy rolled out, 40 motorcycles leading the way, followed by a dozen trucks and vans loaded with supplies and additional volunteers. They made an impressive sight as they thundered down the highway, turning heads and drawing honks from passing cars. Road Dogg led the way, guiding them to the service road, then through the hole in the fence, and finally down the path to where the veteran's lean-to stood in the morning light. As they approached, he could see the veteran emerging from his shelter, squinting at the procession with understandable confusion and perhaps a touch of alarm. Road Dogg pulled ahead of the group and dismounted, approaching alone with his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Morning," he called out. "Brought some friends who wanted to meet you." The veteran stood warily at the entrance to his shelter, taking in the scene, the long line of motorcycles, the trucks full of materials, the crowd of people in leather cuts and work clothes. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice calm despite the strange situation. Road Dogg smiled. "This is the thank you I didn't properly give you last night. You helped me when I needed it, shared what you had even though it wasn't much. Now me and my brothers want to return the favor." The veteran's eyes moved from Road Dogg to the crowd behind him, then back again. "That's a lot of people for one, thank you." "Well," Road Dogg said with a shrug, "we don't do anything halfway." And when they heard about a Vietnam vet living out here because the system failed him, they all wanted to help. "I don't need charity," the veteran said, though his voice held no anger, just a quiet dignity. "This isn't charity," Big Mike said, stepping forward to join Road Dogg. "This is veterans taking care of veterans, brothers helping brothers. No different than what you'd do for any of us if the situations were reversed." For a long moment, the veteran stood silently, his weathered face unreadable. Then slowly a smile broke through like sun through clouds. "Well," he said finally, "I guess I could use a hand fixing that leak in the corner." The rumble of motorcycle engines filled the morning air as the convoy arrived at the veterans' makeshift shelter. 50 bikers, their chrome and leather gleaming in the autumn sun, formed a semicircle around the humble structure. Behind them, trucks loaded with building materials and supplies created a perimeter that transformed the empty lot into an impromptu construction site. The veteran watched with a mixture of disbelief and caution as the bikers dismounted. He'd lived on the streets long enough to be wary of large groups showing up unannounced, but something in Road Dogg's manner put him at ease. These men and women hadn't come to cause trouble. They'd come with purpose. "I still don't understand," the veteran said as Road Dogg walked him through the growing crowd, introducing him to key members. "All this for a bowl of beans and holding a flashlight?" Big Mike, the chapter president, overheard the comment and stepped forward. His massive frame and full beard gave him an imposing presence, but his eyes held a warmth that belied his rough appearance. "It wasn't about the beans," Big Mike explained, his voice gruff but kind. "It was about what that gesture meant. You had every reason to ignore a stranded biker, especially one wearing these colors. Instead, you shared what little you had. That says something about a man's character." The veteran shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just seemed like the right thing to do." "And this seems like the right thing for us to do," Big Mike replied, gesturing to the activity around them. "We take care of our own. You wore the uniform, same as a lot of us. That makes you family." Before the veteran could respond, Hammer approached with rolled-up building plans tucked under his arm. In daylight, the construction worker's weathered face showed the lines of a man who'd spent decades under the sun, working with his hands. "Got a minute?" Hammer asked. "Wanted to show you what we're thinking." He spread the plans across the hood of a nearby pickup truck. The veteran leaned in, his eyes widening as he took in the detailed drawings. "This is," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Nothing fancy," Hammer said modestly. "Just a solid shelter, 16 by 24 feet, insulated walls, proper roof, raised floor to keep out the damp. Got a main living area, sleeping space, and a small area we can set up as a kitchenette." The veteran traced his finger over the drawing. "You drew this up last night?" Hammer nodded. "Had some help from a buddy who does architecture. Figured we'd build it right here, unless you've got somewhere else in mind." The veteran looked around at the spot that had been his home for the past 3 years. It wasn't much, but it was familiar territory. Close enough to town for necessities, but secluded enough to avoid harassment. "Here's good," he said finally. "If you're really serious about this," Big Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "Dead serious. Now we could use your input since you know this area. Where does the water flow when it rains? Any spots we should avoid?" And just like that, the veteran was no longer just a recipient of charity but an active participant in the project. He walked the site with Big Mike and Hammer, pointing out drainage issues, discussing the best positioning for the structure, sharing his knowledge of the area's peculiarities. His military experience and years in construction made him a natural at logistics, and soon he was helping organize the workflow, his initial reluctance giving way to practical engagement. Meanwhile, the site had erupted into organized chaos. One team began clearing the area, respectfully dismantling the veteran's lean-to and carefully setting aside his few possessions. Another group marked out the foundation lines, driving stakes and running string to establish the building's footprint. Others unloaded materials from the trucks, creating neatly organized piles of lumber, plywood, insulation, and roofing materials. The atmosphere was unlike any construction site the veteran had ever worked on. Music blared from portable speakers, laughter and good-natured ribbing filled the air, and cold drinks were passed around despite the cool weather. It felt more like a community barn raising than a construction project, with everyone finding ways to contribute regardless of their building experience. "Hey, Chief," called a wiry biker with sleeve tattoos and a gray ponytail. "Got a bunch of folks here who don't know a hammer from a handsaw. What can they do?" The veteran thought for a moment. "We need a chow line set up, and somebody to organize all these tools coming in. Also need runners to fetch supplies as we call for them." "You got it," the biker replied, seemingly pleased to have direction. He moved off, gathering the less construction-savvy volunteers into teams. By mid-morning, the foundation was laid out and the floor joists were being assembled. The veteran found himself working alongside Sparky, an electrician whose nickname matched both his profession and his energetic personality. "So we're running conduit through the walls," Sparky explained, showing the veteran his electrical plans. "Got a couple of deep-cycle marine batteries donated, plus those solar panels Tank's cousin brought. Nothing fancy, but enough to run some lights, maybe charge a phone, power a small TV if you want one." The veteran stared at him. "You're putting electricity in this place?" Sparky grinned. "21st century, brother. No reason you can't have the basics. Got a buddy at the cable company, too. Might be able to run some internet out here." Throughout the day, more people arrived. Friends of friends, family members, even a few locals who had seen the activity and stopped to investigate. Each newcomer was quickly incorporated into the workforce, handed a task and made to feel part of something important. Around noon, a food truck pulled up, its owner a former club member who now ran a successful mobile kitchen. "Lunch is on me today," he announced, opening the service window. "Got pulled pork sandwiches, burgers, dogs, and sides." The work paused as everyone grabbed food, gathering in small groups to eat and rest. The veteran found himself sitting with Road Dogg and a few others, including a quiet woman who had arrived with one of the Richmond chapter members. "My dad was in Vietnam," she said, passing the veteran a cold drink. "101st Airborne. Never talked about it much, but I know it changed him." The veteran nodded. "It changed all of us. Some ways good, some ways not so good. He would have been here today if he could," she continued. "Passed last year, cancer." "I'm sorry to hear that," the veteran said sincerely. She smiled, though her eyes were sad. "He'd like knowing I was here helping another vet. He always said the guys who served with him were the only ones who really understood him." Similar conversations took place across the site. Stories of fathers, brothers, uncles, and grandparents who had served. The veteran realized that for many of these volunteers, this project was about more than just helping him. It was about honoring their own connections to military service, about feeling they were doing something tangible for the veterans in their lives by proxy. After lunch, the work resumed with renewed energy. The floor was completed and wall framing began, rising quickly as multiple teams worked simultaneously. The veteran moved from group to group, lending his expertise where needed, learning new techniques where his knowledge had gaps. Despite the decades since his construction days, the skills came back quickly. Muscle memory taking over as he showed younger workers how to properly set a nail or make a clean cut. By mid-afternoon, the walls were up and secured, the roof trusses were being assembled on the ground, and windows and doors had arrived in a pickup truck driven by a club member's wife. "Special delivery," she called out, hopping down from the cab. "Got 'em at a contractor discount. Double-paned, good insulation value." The veteran ran his hand over the vinyl window frames. "These are too nice." "Nothing's too nice for a man who served," she replied matter-of-factly. "My brother did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Came home with a Purple Heart and PTSD so bad he couldn't work for 3 years. People like you paved the way for better treatment for people like him. So no, these aren't too nice. If anything, they're not nice enough." As the day wore on, the transformation became more and more remarkable. What had started as a bare patch of ground with a makeshift lean-to was now taking shape as a real structure with walls, a roof, windows, and a proper door. The solar panels were being mounted on the south-facing roof section. Wiring was being run through the walls, and insulation was being tucked between studs. Local news crews had gotten wind of the project and arrived to film the unusual sight of Hells Angels and other motorcycle clubs engaged in community service. The veteran tried to avoid the cameras, uncomfortable with the attention, but Road Dogg convinced him to say a few words. "They want to hear from you," Road Dogg urged. "People need to know that veterans are out here, falling through the cracks. Maybe your story will help someone else." Reluctantly, the veteran agreed to a brief interview, speaking not about his own situation but about the broader issues facing veterans, the bureaucratic hurdles, the lack of mental health support, the difficulty of transitioning back to civilian life. He was articulate and passionate, his words carrying the weight of lived experience. "The system's broken," he told the reporter, "has been for a long time. But people aren't broken. What's happening here today proves that. Regular folks stepping up where institutions have failed." As evening approached, portable lights were set up to allow work to continue. No one wanted to leave until the structure was at least weather-tight. The roof was completed and shingled, the windows and door installed, and the exterior walls covered with house wrap to protect against the elements. Inside, insulation filled every wall cavity, electrical outlets were being installed, and the subfloor was being prepared for laminate flooring that would arrive the next day. Big Mike called for attention as the work wound down for the night. "Listen up," he said, his voice carrying across the site. "We've done good work today, but we're not finished. We'll be back tomorrow to complete the interior, install the kitchen area, finish the electrical, and make this place a proper home. For tonight, we've got a tent set up with cots for anyone who wants to stay on site as security. For the rest, we meet back here at 0800 tomorrow." He turned to the veteran. "Unless you've got other plans for the day?" The veteran smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "My calendar's pretty open." As the crowd began to disperse with promises to return in the morning, the veteran found himself standing beside Road Dog, looking at what they'd accomplished. "Why?" he asked simply. "Really, why all this?" Road Dog was quiet for a moment. "You know what the patch on my back means to most people? Trouble, danger, something to cross the street to avoid, and sometimes that reputation serves a purpose. But it's not who we are to each other. Within the club, that patch means brotherhood. It means having each other's backs no matter what. What you did last night, sharing your meal, helping me fix my bike, you treated me like a brother when you had no reason to. Today we're just returning the favor." The veteran nodded slowly, understanding. "Brotherhood isn't about the uniform you wear." "Exactly," Road Dog agreed. "Whether it's army greens or leather cuts, it's about recognizing something in each other. Something worth standing up for." As night fell fully, a small group remained behind. Half a dozen bikers who had volunteered for the overnight watch, setting up camp near the new structure. They built a fire in an old drum, passing around coffee and stories as stars appeared overhead. The veteran sat among them, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced since his army days. Tomorrow the work would continue. The miracle would unfold further, but for tonight, it was enough to sit in the circle of firelight with these unlikely brothers, connected by something deeper than circumstance. The understanding that sometimes the family you find matters more than the one you're born into. Dawn broke over the construction site with the gentle colors of promise. The veteran had barely slept, his mind too full of the previous day's events and the strange turn his life had taken. He'd spent the night in a tent the bikers had set up, comfortable on a cot with real blankets, but he'd risen before the sun, making coffee on his camping stove for the overnight crew. They sat together in the growing light, steam rising from their mugs, watching as the new structure took shape before them. No longer just a plan or a frame, but a real building with walls and a roof and windows that caught the first rays of morning sun. "Still can't believe it," the veteran murmured, more to himself than to the others. Diesel, a massive mechanic with forearms like tree trunks, chuckled beside him. "Believe it, brother. And today's gonna be even better. Wait till you see what's coming." By 7:30, vehicles were already pulling in, earlier than the scheduled 8:00 start. First came the materials trucks, loaded with interior supplies, drywall, flooring, paint, cabinets. Then the work crews started arriving, many of the same faces from yesterday, but also new ones. Word having spread further through the night. A van pulled up with Thompson's Home Furnishings painted on the side. A middle-aged man in a neat polo shirt stepped out, approached Big Mike and spoke with him briefly. Big Mike then waved the veteran over. "This is Roy Thompson," Big Mike explained. "Owns a furniture store across town. Says he heard about what we're doing on the news last night and wants to help." Roy extended his hand. "My dad was in Korea. Always taught me to respect those who served. I brought some basics, bed, table, chairs, small couch. Nothing fancy, but all new. If that's okay?" The veteran was momentarily speechless, then managed to shake the offered hand. "More than okay. Thank you." Roy nodded, clearly moved. "Least I could do. I'll have my guys unload when you're ready for the furniture." Similar scenes played out throughout the morning as more community members arrived, a local restaurant owner bringing hot breakfast for the entire crew, a group of nursing students offering first aid support for any construction injuries, an elderly woman with a car full of homemade quilts and curtains. The work resumed with the same energy as the day before, but with even more hands making light work. Inside the structure, drywall went up at remarkable speed, with teams measuring, cutting, and hanging the panels while others followed behind with tape and joint compound. The electrical system was completed, with outlets, switches, and light fixtures installed. Outside, a small deck took shape at the entrance, creating a proper porch where before there had been only dirt. The veteran found himself working alongside Doc, the former military medic, installing kitchen cabinets that had arrived on one of the morning trucks. "These are brand new," the veteran observed. Running his hand over the smooth surface, Doc nodded. "Buddy of mine works at a cabinet shop. These were a custom order where the customer changed their mind at the last minute. Would have just sat in a warehouse otherwise." They worked in companionable silence for a while, each appreciating the other's efficiency and attention to detail. Habits formed in military service where precision could mean the difference between life and death. "You been out long?" the veteran finally asked. 8 years, Doc replied. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. You? 53 years, the veteran said with a small smile. "Sometimes feels like yesterday, sometimes feels like another lifetime." Doc paused in his work. "Can I ask you something? Does it ever, I don't know, settle down in your head? All the stuff we saw did?" The veteran considered the question seriously. "Not settle down exactly. More like it finds its place. Becomes part of you instead of something fighting against you. Takes time, though. And support," Doc added, glancing around at the bustling activity. "That's what a lot of us found in the club. Same brotherhood as in the service, just with different uniforms." Outside, the solar panel system was being completed under Tank's supervision. His cousin, a renewable energy specialist, had brought additional panels and was explaining the setup to an interested group of bikers. "Systems designed to be efficient and low maintenance," he explained. "These panels will charge the battery bank during the day, giving you power for lights, small appliances, even a TV or computer. Not enough for heavy loads like air conditioning, but more than enough for the basics." The veteran listened, amazed at the thought that his new home would have electricity, something he hadn't had reliable access to in years. It seemed impossible, yet it was happening before his eyes. By midday, the transformation was even more remarkable. The interior walls were finished and being painted in warm, neutral tones chosen by a biker's wife with an eye for design. Laminate flooring was being laid throughout, giving the space a clean, finished look. In the kitchenette area, a small refrigerator had appeared along with a microwave and a 2-burner hot plate. A partition created a sleeping area where Roy's delivery men were setting up a real bed, not just a mattress, but a complete setup with frame, box spring, and headboard. Throughout the day, the veteran tried to help wherever he could, but he frequently found himself simply standing in awe, watching the miracle unfold around him. Occasionally, someone would approach with a question or ask for his input on some detail of the construction, and he would snap back to the present, offering his expertise or opinion. One such moment came when Sparky called him over to discuss the lighting. "Got 2 options for the main fixtures," the electrician explained, holding up different styles. "This basic one or this slightly fancier one. What's your preference?" The veteran started to say he didn't care, that anything was fine, but stopped himself. This was going to be his home. For the first time in years, he had choices about his living space, and the realization hit him with unexpected force. "The simpler one," he said finally. "Less to go wrong with it." Sparky nodded approvingly. "Practical. I like that." As afternoon progressed into evening, the pace didn't slow. If anything, there was a sense of increased urgency, everyone wanting to complete the project before darkness fell. The porch was finished and stained, complete with a small bench built by one of the Richmond chapter members who did carpentry on the side. Inside, curtains were being hung on the windows, real curtains that could open and close, not just sheets or tarps pinned up for privacy. In what was becoming the living area, a small entertainment center had been set up with a television and DVD player donated by one of the club members. "Nothing fancy," he'd said gruffly. "Just my old one since I upgraded, but it works fine." Around 6 p.m., a truck arrived from a local restaurant, the owner having heard about the project and decided to provide dinner for everyone involved. Tables were set up outside, and for an hour, the work paused as everyone ate together in the warm glow of achievement. The veteran found himself seated at a table with Big Mike, Road Dog, and several others who had been central to organizing the project. As they ate, Big Mike nudged Road Dog, who reached into his leather jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Almost forgot," Road Dog said, sliding the envelope across to the veteran. "Got something else for you." The veteran opened it cautiously, then stared in disbelief at what was inside. A letter on official Veterans Affairs letterhead, and an ID card with his name and photo. "How did—" he began, looking up in confusion. "Club's got connections everywhere," Big Mike explained with a smile. "One of our support members works at the VA office downtown. Once he heard your story, he pulled some strings, found your file, got things moving. That letter confirms your benefits have been reinstated, backdated 3 years. There's a check coming, apparently. And that ID card gets you access to all VA services again." The veteran held the documents like they might dissolve in his hands. After 3 years of getting nowhere, of being shuffled from office to office, of being told to fill out forms that went nowhere, suddenly, it was resolved. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't need to say anything," Road Dogg replied. "Just use it. Get the medical care you need. Use those benefits you earned." As night fell, portable lights were again set up and the final push began. Furnishings were arranged. The small bathroom area was completed with a camping toilet and portable shower setup, and the kitchen was stocked with basic supplies, dishes, utensils, pots and pans, and even food to fill the new refrigerator and cabinets. Finally, around 10 p.m., Big Mike called for everyone's attention. "All right, folks," he announced, his voice carrying across the site. "I think we can call it done. Let's show the man his new home." The crowd gathered around as the veteran was led to the front door, a real door with a real lock, something he hadn't had in years. Road Dogg handed him a key. "It's all yours," he said simply. "Want to do the honors?" The veteran took the key, feeling its weight in his palm, then unlocked the door and stepped inside. The crowd followed, cramming into the small space to witness his reaction. The interior was warm, clean, and welcoming. Lights glowed softly, powered by the solar system. The furniture, though simple, was arranged to create a comfortable living space. On the walls hung a few items that had been brought throughout the day: a framed American flag in a shadow box, a landscape painting donated by a local artist, and a large, framed photograph of the entire build crew taken earlier that day. In the kitchen area, cabinets were stocked with food and supplies. The refrigerator hummed quietly, already cold and filled with groceries. On the counter sat a coffee maker, a luxury the veteran hadn't enjoyed in years. The sleeping area contained not just the bed, but also a small dresser filled with new clothes still bearing tags, jeans, shirts, socks, underwear, all in his size. At the foot of the bed sat a footlocker painted in army green, a silent acknowledgement of his service. The bathroom area, though basic, offered privacy and dignity with its portable systems. A shelf held towels, soap, shampoo, a razor, and other toiletries. The kind of everyday items most people took for granted but which had become rare luxuries in the veteran's life on the streets. Throughout the small home, thoughtful touches revealed the care that had gone into its creation. A bookshelf with a few paperbacks and magazines, a small radio on the bedside table, a hook by the door where a jacket already hung, a wall clock quietly ticking away the minutes of a new chapter in his life. The veteran moved slowly through the space, touching things as if to confirm their reality, his expression a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. When he turned back to face the crowd crammed into his new home, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you all," he said, his voice steady despite his emotion. "This is more than I ever expected to have again." "No thanks needed," Big Mike replied, speaking for the group. "But there is one house rule we need to tell you about." The veteran raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "First Sunday of every month," Big Mike said with a grin. "The Oakland chapter has breakfast together at Molly's Diner on Hawthorne Street. 8 a.m. sharp. We expect you to be there." A ripple of laughter and agreement moved through the crowd. "I think I can manage that," the veteran replied, a real smile breaking across his weathered face. As the crowd began to disperse, with handshakes, hugs, and promises to check in, the veteran stood in the doorway of his new home, watching them go. Road Dogg was one of the last to leave. "You good?" he asked simply. The veteran nodded. "More than good. But one question's been bothering me all day." "What's that?" "Why'd you come back? You could have just gone on your way last night, never thought about me again. What made you bring all this?" He gestured to the new structure around him. Road Dogg considered the question seriously. "You know what I thought when I pulled away from your shelter last night?" I thought, there goes a man who has every reason to be bitter, every excuse to turn his back on the world that turned its back on him. But instead, he's still looking out for others. And it hit me that if you could do that with so little, what excuse do the rest of us have? He paused, gathering his thoughts. The club, for all its reputation, we're about brotherhood, about taking care of our own, about standing up when others sit down. You reminded me what that really means. So yeah, I had to come back. We all did. The veteran extended his hand. Thank you, Road Dogg, for everything. Just pay it forward when you can, Road Dogg replied, shaking the offered hand. That's how it works. As the last vehicles pulled away and silence settled over the area, the veteran closed the door, his door, and locked it with his key. For the first time in 3 years, he had a real roof over his head, a real bed to sleep in, walls to keep out the cold. But more than that, he had been reminded that he wasn't forgotten, that his service mattered, that he still belonged to something larger than himself. He moved around the small space, turning off lights, still marveling at each new feature he discovered. Finally, he sat on the edge of his new bed, removed his boots, and lay back on the clean sheets, staring up at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments, learning to live indoors again, figuring out how to navigate the VA system that had been reopened to him, deciding what to do with the back benefits that would soon arrive. But for tonight, he simply allowed himself to feel safe, warm, and remembered, gifts beyond price from strangers who had become family in the span of 2 remarkable days. The morning sun streamed through real windows, casting warm squares of light across the floor of the veteran's new home. He woke slowly, momentarily confused by the soft mattress beneath him, the roof over his head, the walls around him. For 3 years he'd awakened to the sounds of the city stirring, the chill of dawn seeping through his makeshift shelter. Today he opened his eyes to silence and warmth. He sat up, running his hand over the clean sheets, still half convinced he was dreaming. But the events of the past 2 days hadn't been a dream. The small house around him was solid proof of that, a miracle constructed by leather-clad angels in a matter of hours. Moving to the kitchen area, he found himself smiling at the simple luxury of turning on a tap and watching clean water flow into the small basin. The solar-powered pump pulled water from a large rain collection tank the bikers had installed, filtering it for washing and cooking. It wasn't city plumbing, but after years of carrying water in jugs from public fountains, it felt like unimaginable wealth. He made coffee in the new machine, savoring the aroma that filled the small space. Outside, the world continued as it always had. Traffic hummed on the distant highway. Birds called from the trees at the edge of the lot, but everything else had changed. As he sipped his coffee on the small front porch, a car pulled up, a battered station wagon he didn't recognize. A woman stepped out, middle-aged with kind eyes and practical clothes, carrying a canvas bag over her shoulder. "Hope I'm not disturbing you," she called as she approached. "I'm Linda. My husband was with the group yesterday, Sparky the electrician. He told me about what happened here, and I thought I'd stop by." The veteran stood, suddenly conscious of how long it had been since he'd observed the normal courtesies of receiving a visitor at his home. "Not disturbing at all. Would you like coffee?" "Just made a fresh pot," Linda smiled. "That would be lovely, thank you." Inside, she looked around approvingly. They did good work. Sparky was so excited when he came home last night, couldn't stop talking about it. The veteran poured her coffee in one of his new mugs. "I still can't quite believe it all happened." "Well, I can," Linda said, accepting the mug with thanks. "That's how these boys are. Tough. As nails on the outside, marshmallows underneath." She reached into her bag. "Anyway, I brought something. Sparky mentioned you're a veteran, and it reminded me of a program I volunteer with at the VA hospital downtown." She pulled out some brochures and a business card. "It's called Veteran Peer Support. Connects vets who've been through rough patches with others who might need a guide. We're always looking for people who've actually walked the walk, so to speak. Thought you might be interested once you're settled." The veteran took the materials, genuinely intrigued. "I might be. To be honest, been so focused on day-to-day survival, haven't thought much about what comes next." "No pressure," Linda assured him. "Just something to consider." Programs helped a lot of vets find purpose again. They chatted for a while longer, Linda sharing stories about other veterans who'd found their footing through the program, the veteran asking questions about how it all worked. When she left, he had her number saved in the prepaid phone one of the bikers had given him. and a standing invitation to visit the VA hospital the following week. The rest of the day passed in a blur of visitors and adjustments. Around noon, Road Dogg and Hammer stopped by to check on the solar system and make sure everything was functioning properly. They brought lunch from a nearby deli and news that the story of the build had gone viral overnight. "You're all over the internet," Road Dogg informed him, showing video clips on his phone of the construction project. News picked it up, then social media took it and ran. "People are calling it the biker build." The veteran watched the clips with mixed emotions. On one hand, it was strange seeing himself on screen, his story broadcast to strangers. On the other, the coverage focused more on the community effort than on him personally, which was a relief. "What's all this attention mean for the club?" he asked, concerned that the publicity might cause problems for the Hells Angels given their complicated public image. Road Dogg shrugged. "Truth is, we've always done community work. Toy drives, fundraisers for sick kids, food banks. Media just usually doesn't cover that side of things. But honestly, we don't care about the publicity. What matters is that you've got a roof over your head." Later that afternoon, a van arrived from the VA office bringing the Veterans Affairs counselor that Big Mike had mentioned, a former Marine named Wilson who had taken a personal interest in the case after hearing about it from his biker connection. "Got your paperwork all sorted," Wilson explained, spreading forms across the small dining table. "Your benefits have been officially reinstated, backdated 3 years like we promised. There's quite a bit of money coming your way, $63,000 in back benefits." The veteran stared at the figure on the form. It was more money than he'd seen in decades. "What am I supposed to do with all that?" Wilson smiled. "That's entirely up to you, but I'd be happy to help you figure out a plan. Could set up a bank account, maybe look into some financial counseling to make it last. Maybe even think about some job training if you're interested in getting back into the workforce." For the next 2 hours, they went through options, with Wilson patiently explaining each benefit the veteran was entitled to. Not just the monthly stipend, but also health care, education benefits, housing assistance, and more. By the time Wilson left, they had appointments set up for the following week to establish a bank account, meet with a VA doctor, and discuss potential vocational training programs. The veteran sat at his table after Wilson departed, looking at the pile of forms and information packets, feeling both overwhelmed and hopeful. 3 days ago, he'd been invisible to the system, another homeless vet slipping through the cracks. Now doors were opening everywhere he looked. As evening approached, another visitor arrived, Big Mike, this time alone, riding his massive Harley that gleamed even in the fading light. "Brought you something," the club president said, handing over a small box as they sat on the porch. Little housewarming gift. Inside was a simple, brass plaque that read, "Home of a Vietnam veteran, built with respect by the Brothers of the Road, October 2025. Thought you might want to put it by the door," Big Mike suggested. "If you want to, that is." The veteran ran his fingers over the engraved letters. "I'd be proud to." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Finally, Big Mike spoke again. "Something else I wanted to talk to you about. Been thinking about what happened here, how it all came together so quick once people knew there was a need. Got me wondering how many other vets are out there in the same situation." The veteran nodded. "Too many. Met a lot of them over the years. Guys sleeping under bridges and parks in cars if they're lucky." "That's what I figured," Big Mike said. "So I made some calls today. Talked to presidents of other chapters across the state, some other MC clubs too. Everyone agrees what we did here shouldn't be a one-time thing." He pulled out his phone, showing the veteran a rough logo someone had designed, a motorcycle wheel combined with military dog tags and the words, "Veterans First," arching over the top, thinking of making it official. "A coalition of motorcycle clubs dedicated to identifying homeless vets and getting them emergency housing, using our networks, our skills, our manpower to do what the system's failing to do. What do you think?" The veteran studied the logo. "I think it's needed, more than most people realize." "That's what I thought too," Big Mike agreed. "And here's the thing. We need someone who understands both sides. Someone who's been there, who knows what it's like to fall through the cracks, but who also gets the military mindset. Someone who can help us identify vets who need help and approach them the right way." He paused. "Wondered if you might be interested in being part of it." The veteran looked at him in surprise. Me? Why not? You've got the experience, got the perspective. And now you've got a base of operations. Plus, way I hear it, you've got some money coming that means you don't need to worry about immediate employment. For the second time that day, the veteran was presented with an unexpected opportunity. A chance not just to rebuild his own life, but to help others do the same. I'd need to think about it, he said finally. Big Mike nodded, understanding. Of course, no rush. We're just in the planning stages anyway, but the offer's there. After Big Mike left, the veteran sat alone on his porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky. His mind was full of the day's conversations, the possibilities that had suddenly opened before him. After years of narrowing horizons, of diminishing options, the world seemed to be expanding again, offering paths he'd never expected to walk. He thought about Linda's peer support program, about Wilson's mention of vocational training, about Big Mike's Veterans First initiative. Different routes, but all leading toward the same destination, a life with purpose, with connection, with meaning beyond mere survival. Inside his new home, he found a notepad and pen among the supplies that had been left for him. At the top of a blank page, he wrote "Next steps," then began listing ideas, possibilities, plans. For the first time in years, he was thinking about the future as something to shape, rather than simply endure. The weeks that followed brought a whirlwind of changes. With Wilson's help, the veteran established a bank account and deposited his back benefits, setting aside portions for emergencies, for improvements to his new home, for transportation, and for future needs. He attended his first medical appointments at the VA hospital, beginning treatment for conditions that had gone unaddressed for too long: arthritis from old injuries, respiratory issues from years of exposure to the elements, dental problems that had plagued him for decades. True to his word, he showed up at Molly's Diner on the first Sunday of the month, joining the Oakland chapter for their regular breakfast. He felt awkward at first, unsure of his place among these men with their matching leather cuts and shared history. But they welcomed him without fuss, making space at their tables, including him in conversations, treating him like one of their own. During that breakfast, Road Dogg introduced him to another visitor, a veteran from Iraq who had returned home with PTSD and struggled to reintegrate into civilian life. "Thought you two might have some things to talk about," Road Dogg said, then left them alone at a corner table. The younger veteran was hesitant at first, guarded in the way of someone who has learned that sharing pain often leads to judgment. But gradually, as they compared experiences across generations, the walls came down. They discovered that despite the decades separating their service, some aspects of war, and of coming home from war, remained unchanged. "How do you deal with it?" the younger man finally asked. "The memories, the dreams, the feeling like nobody gets it?" The older veteran considered the question seriously. "You find people who do get it, or who at least try to. You talk when you need to talk, stay quiet when you need that. You build a life that matters to you day by day, brick by brick, and you remember that you're not alone, even when it feels like you are." It wasn't a profound answer, just an honest one. But something in it seemed to reach the younger man. By the end of breakfast, they had exchanged numbers and made plans to meet again. That conversation was the first of many. As word spread about the biker build and the veteran who had received it, others began to seek him out, some veterans themselves, some family members of veterans, some just citizens moved by the story and wanting to help. Linda's invitation to visit the VA hospital turned into a regular volunteer position with the peer support program. Twice a week, the veteran met with other former service members who were struggling with homelessness, addiction, mental health issues, or simply the challenge of civilian reintegration. His own experience gave him credibility that professional counselors sometimes lacked. He had been where they were, had faced the same demons, had found a way forward. Meanwhile, Big Mike's Veterans First initiative gained momentum. What had started as a local idea quickly spread through the motorcycle club network, with chapters in other cities expressing interest in replicating the Oakland model. The veteran found himself increasingly involved, first as an advisor, then as a key organizer, helping to identify homeless veterans in need and develop approaches tailored to their situations. By the end of the first month, Veterans First had completed 2 more emergency housing projects, smaller than the original build, but still providing secure shelter for veterans who had been living on the streets. By the end of the second month, The initiative had expanded to include partnerships with contractors, building supply companies, and veterans organizations, creating a more sustainable model for ongoing projects. The veterans' own home became something of an unofficial headquarters, a place where bikers, veterans, and volunteers gathered to plan projects, share resources, and sometimes simply enjoy the camaraderie that had grown around the movement. The veteran found himself at the center of a community that bridged worlds he had never expected to connect. The rough-edged brotherhood of motorcycle clubs, the shared experience of military service, the practical compassion of ordinary citizens wanting to make a difference. 6 months after the day Road Dog's motorcycle had broken down in the rain, the veteran stood at the podium of a community center, addressing a gathering of motorcycle club members, veterans advocates, city officials, and media representatives. Behind him hung the veteran's first logo, now professionally designed and printed on a large banner. When I shared my dinner with a stranger that night, I wasn't looking for anything in return, he told the assembled crowd. I was just doing what seemed right in the moment. What happened afterward, this movement that's grown beyond anything I could have imagined, proves something I've always believed, that people want to help each other. Sometimes they just need to be shown how. He gestured to the bikers seated in the front row, their leather cuts standing out among the suits and casual wear of the other attendees. These men and women are often judged by their appearance, by patches on their backs, by reputations that don't tell their whole story. But they've shown what real community looks like. Not waiting for government programs or official solutions, but stepping up and saying, we can fix this ourselves. From the back of the room, a reporter called out a question. What would you say to other homeless veterans who might be hearing this story? The veteran considered his answer carefully. I'd say that your service mattered and you matter. That there are people out there who haven't forgotten what you gave to this country, and that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. After the event, as people mingled and networked, the veteran found himself standing with Road Dog, watching the diverse crowd interact, bikers chatting with city council members, VA officials exchanging cards with motorcycle club presidents, veterans of different eras finding common ground. Did you ever imagine this? The veteran asked, gesturing to the scene before them. That night when your bike broke down? Road Dog shook his head. Not even close. Just wanted to get to my meeting, stay dry, maybe get my bike running again. Funny how things work out, the veteran mused. One small choice leads to another, then another, and suddenly there's all this. He waved his hand at the banner, the crowd, the future taking shape around them. You know what I think? Road Dog said, clapping a hand on the veteran's shoulder. I think some people go through their whole lives without ever finding their real purpose. Some find it right away, and some have to wait until a motorcycle breaks down in the rain for everything to click into place. The veteran smiled, thinking of the long, winding road that had led him here, from the jungles of Vietnam to the streets of Oakland, from isolation to community, from survival to purpose. Worth the wait, he said simply, and Road Dog nodded in agreement, both men knowing that some journeys, no matter how difficult, lead exactly where you need to go.